Hey guys, what's going on? It's Simon here, and whilst we don't actually have a Minecraft gameplay video for you today, I am bringing you a second part of my update video to how my computer build is going. So I was going to try and sort of record myself doing little bits of piecing the computer together, but it just really didn't work out that was going to be possible. So what I'm going to do today is show you a series of images. I basically took photos along the way. I actually had to do it downstairs on the kitchen table just because there was much better light there. The day that I was building it, got really late, so I couldn't use natural light in my room, and I basically had to use I've got some bright spotlights down there, which is pretty helpful, but even still I probably would have preferred to do it in the daytime. So the image you can see right now, of course, is the components that I showed you in the first video. If you managed to stick through all of that, you would have noticed there all the new components that I'm throwing into this rig. Obviously tearing a few out, but that was just a picture I took of all the new ones. Some of these images aren't going to be perfect. I was pretty knackered. I think I built this till about 4 AM in the morning. It took a lot longer than I expected. It took about 5 hours probably, which is quite a long time. I mean, it shouldn't have taken me that long, but little things were just a bit of a problem. Now, alright, the first sort of proper image I want to show you. So again, like this is under some spotlights, so it's going to appear quite sort of whitewashed in some areas. This was my old rig with the side panel off. There was actually a fan on that side panel, but I've actually decided to take that off just because I'm going to have enough cooling, and I'll show you why towards the end of the video. So in here you can see my old rig. Forgive the cable management, if you know what cable management is. As you see, the wires just look like a bit of a mess. That's partly because I kind of threw that back together because when James's PC went a bit awry a couple of months ago now, my power supply in there, basically we thought it might have been his power supply that was broken. Only way to test that is use a different power supply. I volunteered to use mine, so I had to take it out, which means taking out all your cables and putting it all back in. So I was doing it quite quickly, and I didn't take care over the cable management. Not to mention the fact that this is a super old case. You can tell it's really small. I mean, look how crammed everything is in there. And yeah, it's basically not designed to have this really excellent cable management. So just a quick overview of what I did have. You can see the reason why I'm doing some of these upgrades. If you look at where my CPU is, if you know where a CPU goes, if you see the sort of in the central bit, there's a giant heatsink, the giant aluminium thing with 4 copper pins sticking on each side. They're actually heat pipes. They'll go all the way down. They touch the CPU. And that thing is massive. You can't really get a scale of it there. The fan that's attached to it, that's 12 centimeters wide, just the blade of the fan. So you can tell that that's a pretty beefy thing right there. And even though it's a good cooler, I wanted to basically move on to a more advanced cooling solution, just because then the processor that I bought is going to get pretty hot, especially when I overclock that bad boy. You can see the RAM just about in there. You can't actually take out those RAM sticks until you've taken off the heatsink cover, again because this thing is so big. It's just ridiculous. Obviously I've got my 2 graphics cards in there, and yeah, they're pretty crammed in there, so the air that they're sucking onto themselves, not really doing what it should be doing, just because they're not managing to drag in all the air they need. And then not to mention the fact that the whole system is dusty as fuck, just because the rooms that I've had it in, I've been moving it around a lot from uni back to home, and they've not exactly been the cleanest rooms. That's probably my bad. I need to just keep a tidier room. But yeah, I'm not doing the sort of regular 6-month maintenance on my machine that I really should be doing, just to clear it out of dust. That had been left there for quite a while. Anyway, that's the old system. I'm already at nearly 4 minutes, and I've shown you 2 pictures. I do have about 25 to get through, so let's move on. Right, so the modification that I needed to make to this case, if you see the difference between that picture and this picture, you'll notice that where the hard drive bays were, all of those hard drive bays, I've got 2 in there. That's now gone. And basically this enables me to put in the radiator of my all-in-one water cooling system. So that was the mod that I had to do. It wasn't just screwed in, it was actually using rivets, which is effectively, if you don't really know what a rivet is, it's kind of like a nut and bolt, but it has the function of a nut and bolt, but it's more permanent. It's actually sort of compressed on, and so to remove that, you can see on the left hand side I actually have a knife, a hammer, and some flathead screwdrivers. I started using the knife. I was doing it slowly, trying to be careful. Eventually I just got the hammer and went sort of a bit crazy and used the hammer and the flathead screwdriver just to knock those things off. It wasn't the the most gracious way to do it. I wouldn't say that my case is now damage free. I mean, there's a few scratches around. I wouldn't say I damaged it overly. There's no like massive dents, but a couple of scratches. But at the end of the day, this case is very temporary. I'm moving on to my my cross desk, which is going to be absolutely fucking awesome. You guys will see that in a couple of months. So this is kind of just a temporary solution. But either way, it was fun to do a bit of case modding. I've never done it before, so it was a bit of fun. I'm not sure my housemates liked it. It got pretty loud, but so that's the mod that I had to do. And of course you can see I've cleared out all the components from there, the wires that are there just from the case fans, and then what's called the front panel connectors, where you have your sort of power button, reset button, also like audio cables and some USBs. Okay, so obviously those hard drives went in the hard drive bays, and what I've had to do is fit a couple of adapters to these drives, and that will enable me to throw them into where you could have like a secondary Blu-ray drive player, or some people put in stuff like a fan controller. My case has 3. Fortunately, I'm only using 1 for a DVD sort of rewriter, and then I can put my 2 hard drives right in there, so that's pretty convenient. That's sort of those installed. It's a bit of a blurry image, apologise for that. But it's a really nice way to store those, just because it means now it's all together. They're all actually connected by the same cables as well. They're all SATA cables, or SATA, and so I can just have one cable going up to the top there, and they actually like daisy chain off each other, so it's even off your power supply. It's not just like 3 cables going in, it's one cable that's actually got 4 connectors. Obviously I only need 3. But it works out pretty nicely. Okay, so now for installing some of the new stuff. This is my brand new motherboard, got it out of the anti-static bag. The cable on the left, the little coily cable, I was using what's known as an anti-static wristband. Some people like to use them, some people don't. I just don't want to fry my stuff, and so by basically attaching that to a case or anything that's been earthed, then you won't have any static going through your body from like rubbing on carpet or whatever. And then that means that you're not going to fry your components, which is kind of, that's the main worry where amateur people that like they've never, or say amateur, novice people that have never built a PC before. When I first built my PC, I was so cautious because I was like, I just didn't want to touch anything because I thought I was going to break it. You can actually be a bit more handy with your stuff. I could have picked that up quite happily because I'd been earthed. Once you're earthed, it's fine for the most part. Obviously, you don't want to be like knocking components off, like some of the cylindrical things you see there are capacitors. You don't want to like snap one of those off. It's not going to work. But you can sort of fill around, and you have to be pretty firm with some things. So that's the motherboard, just for review there. First thing you got to do then is put on the processor. Now the processor's nice and shiny there. That's because I used the, if you like, the thumbnail of the last image. Of the last video. James insisted I had to do that when I put the title as Simon the Chemist. So I had that bottle of basically pretty much pure alcohol. That's basically a cleaning fluid, and it helped me clean the top of that, because on top of that is going to sit the heatsink, and I want as much thermal thermal heat transfer through there as possible. Okay, moving on. I've installed that. Then I got out my RAM. It's looking pretty flashy in there. Obviously, I've got the blue series and what's known as the black series, but it actually has a silver little heat shroud. Those things remove themselves. I don't know why they didn't just make a generic one, and then basically they ship out all the different colours. I mean, they do that with some of the Corsair fans. I can't show them to you because I don't actually own any. I might buy some for my new case. They do look pretty cool, but they actually have like a clip-on thing where you have like white, blue or red. But for this, they, probably because it's made of aluminium and actually costs money, they actually just sell it as different colours. But you'll see when I get these installed in the next image, this is why I got 2 different colours rather than all the same. I mean, some people here might have preferred to have all blue. It is a pretty predominantly blue sort of motherboard. You can see the heat sinks over on the top of the image and on the left hand side. They're all blue. I could have gone all blue, but I like the differentiation between them. I think it looks really cool. Unfortunately, the channels RAM, if you can actually just about see at the bottom, there's a black and a blue, and they alternate because it's called dual channel RAM, so you actually need 2 sticks of RAM for it to function to its full effectiveness. And so I've got 2 in the black and 2 in the blue, and they're actually spaced apart, which makes it so I can get that alternating thing going on, which looks pretty sick in sort of my eyes. I think it looks pretty cool. Okay, so now I've installed the motherboard. Now I've got the CPU in, I've put the RAM in. That's pretty much all you want to do. I could have probably attached the CPU cooler head, but because it's attached to a radiator, it could have got pretty awkward. I didn't want to damage the radiator by having like dangling over the side. It wouldn't have been good for anyone. Right, now at the bottom, where I've ripped out the hard drive bays, I mean you can't really see where that's mounted, but that's my solid state drive. It's only 2.5 inches wide, so for scale, you can tell that's pretty small. And that's actually been mounted at the bottom. There are screws that go through the bottom. There's 4 sort of raised up areas, and that will keep that in place. The difference between mechanical hard drives and solid state drives, mechanical actually have a physical disc inside. Kind of, when I say kind of like a DVD, it's not a DVD. It's a much more like high capacity storage drive, but if you imagine the picture of a spinning disc inside there, that's why it's called mechanical, because they're actually physically moving components in there. That's why they do make noise. It's important to have them screwed in properly, because otherwise they'll vibrate your case around and it can damage the drive. Solid state drives have no moving components. It's just flash chips, kind of like a big USB stick almost, and so it doesn't actually generate I would say it doesn't generate any heat. I think it might get warm, quotation marks. It might generate some heat, but basically nothing. And obviously there's no moving components, so that can just sit at the bottom there. It's mounted in place, so it's not going to fall about when I transport my machine. Okay, next thing to install. Going for the PCI cards here, and this was my sound card. Pretty small card, especially when you compare it to the graphics card that I'll be showing you in a minute. But you can see the connector there where it's actually going to plug into the motherboard. That's called a PCIe, which is PCI Express 1X, which is 1 times, because it's got a really small connector there. But that's because it actually doesn't need that much bandwidth to get plugged in. The next card, here we go, the graphics card. I mean, this isn't the most beast mode graphics card in the world. It's actually a pretty powerful graphics card, but it's a really small form factor, so it's pretty small. It doesn't look like it's going to be a monster, but hey, I've used it now. I mean, I'm making this video on it, and I can tell you that it does things pretty well. Let's put it that way. It's definitely better than my old cards, that's for sure. So this is the new card, and hopefully, I assume the next image. Here we go. They're both slotted into the machine. So they're slotted in. I haven't plugged in the power cable for the graphics card yet. However, I have plugged in. You see the mess of coloured cables. I mean, it'd be nice if they were all black, but it's a very old case and it's a very cheap case, so it doesn't have those kind of premium features. But effectively, you can see there, I've plugged in the front panel audio connector, so now I can plug my headset into the front of my PC. I mean, I actually just plug it directly into the back, into the sound card, but obviously some people like to have a removable headset that they can take with them, and it's just easier if they can do that. Or if they're at the machine, they plug in like earphones or whatever if they want to keep the noise down. So that's all connected. The sound card doesn't need any external power. It can draw enough power just from the motherboard. Here you can see I've now installed, I think in the last image, yeah, you can see that the radiator was actually in place there. So I'd installed the radiator and the cables that are actually carrying water. Obviously that's the water cooling tubes. That goes to the CPU head, which is not attached there. And then now it's actually attached onto the CPU. I've screwed it in. The cables are actually much more rigid than I thought. They look like pretty flexible plastic, but they're pretty rigid. I assume there's some kind of metal woven stuff inside of there, just keeping it nice and rigid, which is good, to be fair. I mean, if you've got a water cooling system, the last thing you want is water going over your machine. That's always the risk, but with these like closed loop circuits, they're called, it should be pretty safe. It's pretty awesome though, just having, this is why I had to do the mod. You can see the radiators fitting in where the hard drive bays would have been. It's actually only mounted, it should be mounted through 2 fans. If you can see the brown strip on the right hand side, that's one of my old fans, my old case fans, brown. They were made by a company called Akasa, and it was their Apache fans, and that's basically, an Apache obviously is a helicopter, and these were designed effectively by the military to produce better airflow. And that's why they were named that way. So it's only attached by 1 fan. It should be attached by 2, but believe me, with 4 screws going in there, it's not going anywhere. So I do still have a fan that I will be putting up at the top there. It's not just going to have 2 fans covering it at the bottom and just 1 fan at the top. It does have 2 fans either side, but I just haven't put it on at the present time. So you can also see obviously the 2 fans on the other side. Now the reason why I've got a fan on each side, it's not that they're going to be like acting against each other. I've orientated them so they're both going to be acting in the same way. It's what's called push-pull. So for example, if I just had fans on one side, it might be pushing air through the radiator. If I had it on the other side, it might just be pulling air through the radiator. And pretty obviously, if it's push-pull, it means you've got air going from each side. It's a bit overkill. It does make obviously it a bit louder having more fans going on, but it does deliver like superior cooling, so that's obviously the primary thing there. Okay, so now the power supply's gone in, and it started to get really messy. So I've started to plug a few things in. You can see here all the power supply cables. Unfortunately, my power supply is quite an old one. It's still very good. I mean, it's a Corsair TX series, which is still very well made power supply, hence why I didn't feel the need to buy a new one. But the more modern power supplies are what's called modular, where effectively a power supply comes with more cables than you would probably need. I mean, in theory, it comes with enough PCIe cables that I could plug in at least 2 graphics cards. If I had those graphics cards, I mean, I could plug in 4 because it only requires 1 cable per graphics card. But I've only got 1, so there's 3 spare cables there that aren't getting used. They've got to go somewhere. Modular power supplies, you only have to plug in the cables that you need. So effectively it comes as a square box and then you attach the cables manually. It's a much more efficient system, but unfortunately I didn't see the need basically to spend an extra £90 to £100 just on a new power supply for no apparent reason. So obviously in my new build I'll be buying a brand new one and it will be modular, which will be really nice. But for this one it's not too much of a concern. I'm not too worried about the mess, especially in my new case or sort of desk case, the Cross. That's going to be really, really big. There's going to be so much space for cable management just to hide those cables away that I'm not going to need to worry. And you can also see on the right hand side there, I've now attached the second fan. Now it's not actually mounted on because the mounting holes don't line up due to the way that the fan cages are attached at the front, but that will still be blowing air through. Although I say it will be blowing air through, unfortunately due to the way this motherboard's set up, the cables on those fans aren't quite long enough right now to reach over to the other fan connectors on the motherboard. One of them reaches, but there's only one on that side, and so what I need to do is just buy a very cheap adapter, which will take it either from it's a 4-pin connector, which I mean that might mean nothing to you, but that means it plugs into a 4-pin socket on the motherboard. I can either convert it into what's known as a Molex, which is directly from the power supply, or I can effectively get an extension and then plug it into the other part of the motherboard where those other connectors are. But that's pretty much the system complete. I mean, I've clearly plugged in the power cable there for the graphics cards now powered. The actual water cooling loop is now powered. It's a very weird power system. I had to plug one cable. It came with one cable, but then it split into 2. I had to plug one part of it into the motherboard and another part of it into a Molex directly into the power supply. Pretty strange. The motherboard's fully plugged in. There's a power connector that's right at the top left. I say right at the top left. Directly above the blue heatsink on the left is an 8-pin power connector, and there's one that's pretty hidden away behind a mess of cables, and it's a 24-pin power connector. That's the beefy one that you might be able to see in one of the next few images. So that's pretty much the same image. I can't really see what's changed there whatsoever, but there you go. And then, okay, that's just showing obviously the mod that I've done. I've removed those hard drive bays, and that's my water cooling radiator. Pretty cool. And unfortunately, the way the hard drive bays were made, it was made so that behind those hard drive bays was your cable management. So you see that absolute crap ton of mess of cables behind there. That's because that's where the cable management was supposed to be. You're supposed to just ram the cables in there so they can't get seen. Now they can get seen because obviously I've taken those away. And I've just got to make sure those cables don't actually go into the fan blades, because trust me, if you boot that up with something in the way of a fan blade, you're going to hear it. It's going to make some noise, and it could even damage a fan, which you definitely don't want. I've done it in the past. I haven't damaged a fan, but I've definitely heard it. And it's one of those things that makes you shut off your computer pretty quick. Let's just put it that way. This is just a close-up, so you can see my water cooling loop. Obviously this is at the other end, which is actually attaches directly to the CPU. That button in the middle is actually a button, and when it's plugged in, those sort of 3 sections of the 270-degree loop round the thing, that is 3 different modes. You can have quiet mode, balance mode, and performance mode, which basically is just varying the fan speeds, because obviously, and probably varying the pump speed at which it pumps the water around. But obviously the performance mode is going to be quite loud. Quiet mode, I mean, let's be honest, pretty obvious here, it's going to be quite quiet. And balanced is somewhere in the middle, and that's the one I've got it set on right now, because I don't want it too loud, but then again, I want to have some decent cooling. And you can see the RAM sticks in there, all looking pretty. You can just about read the codes on there showing it's the 1866 megahertz RAM, so it's the nice quick RAM, and that is it's doing wonders in my machine. And you can just about again see there the 24-pin power connector, which has the orange, red, and all kinds of multicolored cables in there. It's pretty messy. It's not I wish they made a smaller cable to attach to the motherboard, but the fact is they need all those cables to deliver all the power that your computer needs. Okay, so this is a close-up of the graphics card. It's already got a few little specks of dust on it. That's probably because I basically, as I took my old components out, I'd been cleaning them of dust, and so the room was pretty much filled with dust. But yeah, you can see it sitting there. I mean, again, it's a pretty blurry image. I apologise for that. But you can also just about see the bottom of the sound card, but it's got the front audio panel connectors in there, and you can see the graphics card is plugged in, it's powered, ready to go with that massive fan on it, which is going to cool it down with the heat pipes that it's got going into effectively a similar array of what I had on the old one, the old CPU. So it's got heat pipes, which are basically big metal pipes, and then attached to them you have lots of thin metal aluminium fins, which just disperses the heat as quick as possible, and then the fan blows through those fins, and obviously, ideally, cools your card. So that's what they're going for there. Okay, and last image. This is just to show you again, sort of the primary purpose of this this sort of modification was to get rid of this hard drive base. You can see now I've moved these hard drives up. You can see my DVD drive at the top, and the two hard drives below. The cables are RMS, but they've all got their SATA connectors in, which is the sort of white and black cable, and then they're all connected to power, which is the one to the left of it. It was a bit of a mess to get that in, because they're actually an L-shaped connector, so you can only plug them in one way, and twisting a cable, they're pretty rigid. It's not as easy as you think, so you can't just turn it upside down to, if it's like the L situated one way, you need to turn it the other way. It's not as easy as you'd think, but I managed to get it in there. It's a bit of a mess, but to be fair, there's no airflow really around there, so I don't need to worry about cables blocking airflow. If you have like loads of messy cables, I mean, I know it's going to be closed up, no one's going to see it, so it shouldn't really matter. But if you have loads of messy cables everywhere and your fans are blowing over it, that's directly blocking airflow, which not only makes noise when you obstruct airflow, but also it reduces your cooling performance. Anyway guys, that was the last image. We can cycle around. Yeah, there we go. And back to the components. So, I've rambled for 22 minutes this time. My god, I'm getting really, really bad at this. But I know you guys want an update, and I've effectively now finished the build. I'm clearly on the system, it's working. There's a few small sort of things to work out in terms of sort of optimizing it, and a few things. When I say not performing as expected, the computer's performing fine. Windows is being the thing that's not performing as expected after I've reinstalled Windows. But of course, I've just got to get all my programs on. I've got all the important stuff. I'm clearly recording, so I've got my recording and editing software. That's all ready to go. Of course, I've got my games. I've got my Minecraft installed. I've got my League of Legends and stuff installed. But it's just about getting everything back on it. All my music, my sort of my films, everything like that. I need to get that all back on and get this machine set up. Anyway, I will end it there, guys. Thanks for watching. That is my PC upgrade done, complete, awesome. Thumbs up, yay. So a lot of people were asking for this video. If it's nothing that interests you at all, and you didn't understand what I was on about for the last 23 odd minutes, then apologies, but thanks for watching anyway. If it's something that you're interested in, then cool, hope you enjoyed it. But I'll tell you one thing, as soon as I start building my new machine, whether you like computers or not, I think you'll find that quite interesting. It's going to be quite a unique build. To put it in perspective, to my latest knowledge, only about between 65 and 70 people in the world are going to own the same desk that I'm going to own. And to again put that in perspective, I mean, representatives of people like, pretty sure it's like MSI, which is the people that make my graphics card. I mean, Razer are having one like specially custom made. People that make all the gaming peripherals. The esports teams, Evil Geniuses, have bought one. Heck, I think even Vanilla Ice, the rapper, has bought one. So it's a pretty niche thing. It's going to be pretty spectacular. So I hope you guys are all looking forward to that. I certainly am. The delivery date is just over 2 weeks away in theory, but it's getting delivered about 200 miles from where I am, because I'm going to build it with my brother over Christmas, because that's going to be an awesome time for us to do that together. I'm definitely looking forward to it, because he's like really tech savvy and he'll be able to help me, because building a PC on your own is doable, but it would be definitely easier to like have an extra pair of hands, just for like the small nitty gritty things, just like holding cables and just generally just doing things a bit faster. It definitely helps to have an extra pair of hands on board. Right guys, I'm going to try and keep it under 25 minutes, so I will see you guys soon.